hill looked quiet, too quiet. Early morning mist rested over the hedgerow fields of Normandy like a thin gray blanket. It was August 12th, 1944, just after sunrise. The countryside near the small village of Le Désert was calm for the moment. A narrow dirt road wound through farmland and climbed slowly toward a low hill covered with grass and scattered apple trees. The breeze was light, just enough to move the tall grass along the slope. Birds could still be heard in the distance. If someone had driven past the hill at that moment, they might have believed the war was miles away. But war was already waiting there.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
Hidden just behind the crest of that hill were 6 American M4 Sherman tanks from Company B, 66th Armored Regiment, part of the U.S. 2nd Armored Division. The tanks had moved into position during the night. Their crews had carefully backed them into hull-down firing positions where only the turrets would be exposed once they rolled forward. Branches and loose hedgerow plants had been placed over parts of the tanks to break their outlines. From the road below, nothing could be seen. Inside the lead Sherman, the air was tight and heavy with the smell of oil, gun grease, and metal. Captain Robert Bob Landry sat half inside the commander's hatch. His elbows rested on the rim of the turret as he watched the road through binoculars. He had barely slept during the night. The crew had reached the hill shortly after midnight and spent hours quietly preparing the ambush. Every track mark had been hidden as best as possible. Engines had been shut down until the last moment to avoid noise. By sunrise, the tanks were ready. Now they were simply waiting. Inside the Sherman, the crew spoke very little. Driver Private First Class Eddie Morales leaned forward slightly in his seat, hands resting lightly on the control levers. Gunner Sergeant Tom Wilkes stared through the narrow telescopic sight of the 75mm gun. Loader Corporal James Fulton kept one armor-piercing shell ready beside the breech. Assistant driver Harold Dugan sat beside the bow machine gun, listening carefully for any distant sound of engines. No one wanted to break the quiet. Every man understood that the success of the ambush depended on patience. Captain Landry lowered his binoculars for a moment and looked across the line of Shermans behind him. The other 5 tanks were positioned perfectly along the hill. Their turrets were angled toward the road below, guns already set to cover the likely approach route. The plan was simple. If German tanks appeared on the road, the Shermans would wait until they were close enough to expose their side armor. The American tanks would then open fire together, striking quickly before the enemy could react. Landry knew the risk. The German Panther tank had become one of the most feared vehicles on the battlefield. Its long 75mm gun fired at extremely high velocity. At long range, it could destroy a Sherman easily. The Panther's frontal armor was thick and well sloped. American crews had learned the hard way that shooting directly at the front of a Panther often did nothing. To destroy one, you had to hit the sides, and that meant letting the enemy get dangerously close. Several kilometers away, the Germans were already on the move. 5 Panther tanks from the 2nd SS Panzer Division, das Reich, rolled slowly along a narrow road that cut through the hedgerow country. Their engines produced a deep mechanical roar that echoed between the thick walls of earth and brush. The tanks were advancing cautiously, their long guns pointing forward as their turrets scanned the fields. Standing in the open hatch of the lead Panther was Obersturmführer Karl-Heinz Richter. Richter had been fighting in Normandy since the early days after the Allied landings in June. He had already lost friends and crewmen during the long weeks of fighting around Saint-Lô and Carentan. The Normandy countryside had proven to be a difficult battlefield for German armor. The hedgerows blocked visibility. Roads were narrow. Allied aircraft constantly threatened movement during daylight. But Richter trusted his Panther. The tank beneath him weighed nearly 45 tons and carried one of the most powerful anti-tank guns of the war. Its sloped armor provided strong protection against most Allied weapons. When used properly, a Panther could dominate a battlefield. Still, Richter had learned to be careful. He slowly raised his binoculars and studied the road ahead. The terrain rose slightly toward a low hill in the distance. Hedgerows bordered the road on both sides. Beyond them, green farmland stretched across the countryside. He saw no movement, no American tanks, no infantry. The hill looked completely quiet. Behind Richter's Panther, the rest of the column followed at careful intervals. 4 more Panthers moved steadily along the road. Their commanders stood partially out of the turrets, watching the hedgerows carefully. Inside each German tank, the crews were alert. Driver Hans Becker guided the lead Panther forward slowly, keeping the engine steady as the tank climbed the gentle slope. Gunner Dieter Vogt adjusted the turret slightly, scanning the hill ahead through his sight. The German crews had fought enough battles to know that open ground could be dangerous, but nothing looked suspicious. Back on the hill, Captain Landry suddenly heard it. At first it was just a faint sound, a low mechanical rumble drifting across the fields. Landry raised his binoculars again. A thin cloud of dust was beginning to rise along the road below the hill. German armor was coming. Inside the Sherman turret, Sergeant Wilkes noticed the dust as well. He adjusted his sight and focused on the road. Then the first shape appeared between the hedgerows. A Panther. Its dark steel hull moved slowly forward, long gun pointed ahead as it approached the slope. Wilkes felt his heartbeat quicken. More shapes appeared behind it. 2, 3, 4, 5 Panthers in total. The German column continued climbing toward the hill, unaware that 6 American tanks were already waiting for them just beyond the crest. Inside the Shermans, the atmosphere changed instantly. The quiet waiting turned into sharp focus. Captain Landry spoke calmly over the radio, linking the American tanks. "Hold fire!" The Panthers continued forward. 500 meters. 400. Inside the Sherman turret, Corporal Fulton carefully lifted the armor-piercing round and slid it into the breech of the gun. The heavy metal shell locked into place with a solid click. Sergeant Wilkes kept the lead Panther centered in his sight. 300 meters. Still too far. If they fired now, the Panther's thick front armor might stop the shell. 250 meters. Landry watched carefully through his binoculars. The German tanks were now fully visible on the road. 200 meters. The moment was close. The lead Panther began turning its turret slightly as its commander scanned the hilltop. Landry lowered his binoculars. He raised his hand inside the turret. "Stand by." The German tanks kept coming. 180 meters. 150. Now the Panthers were perfectly positioned. Their side armor faced the hill. Landry gave the signal. The first Sherman fired. The 75mm gun exploded with a deafening crack that shattered the morning quiet. Smoke burst from the muzzle as the recoil slammed the gun backward inside the turret. The armor-piercing shell raced down the slope and struck the lead Panther just behind the turret. The impact sent sparks and fragments flying. The shell punched through the side armor and exploded inside the fighting compartment. Flames burst from the turret hatch as ammunition ignited. Almost instantly, the other Shermans opened fire. The hill erupted with thunder. 6 tanks fired nearly together, their guns flashing through the morning mist. Armor-piercing rounds slammed into the German column from multiple directions. The ambush had begun. The second Panther tried to rotate its turret toward the hill, but before it could fire, a Sherman shell struck its side armor. The impact penetrated cleanly. Black smoke poured from the engine deck. Inside the German tank, the crew struggled as flames spread through the interior. The third Panther attempted to turn off the road and face the attackers. Its driver pushed the engine hard as the tank tried to pivot toward the hill. But another Sherman shell struck the track. The heavy metal links shattered. The Panther lurched violently and stopped. Now the German crews fully understood the danger. They were trapped in an ambush. Obersturmführer Richter reacted immediately. He shouted orders through his headset as his driver threw the Panther into reverse. The tank began backing down the road while the turret swung toward the hill. The German gun fired. The Panther's powerful shells screamed across the field and exploded near the American line, sending dirt and rocks into the air. But the Shermans kept firing. Another American round struck the turret side of the fourth Panther. The armor cracked under the impact. Moments later, flames appeared from the open hatch. The narrow road had become a deadly trap. Burning tanks blocked movement. Thick smoke began rising across the field. The remaining German Panthers struggled to reposition while under constant fire. The rear Panther attempted to escape by reversing quickly down the road. But one of the Shermans on the flank had a perfect angle. The American gun fired again. The shell struck the rear armor of the Panther, destroying its engine. The tank rolled a short distance and stopped. Now only Richter's Panther remained fully operational. Inside his turret, Richter could see burning wrecks around him. The ambush had destroyed most of his platoon within seconds. But the Panther still had its gun. Through the smoke, he spotted the flash of a Sherman firing near the hilltop. Richter ordered his gunner to fire. The German shell struck one of the Shermans directly in the turret. The American tank rocked violently as the round penetrated the armor. Smoke burst from the hatch. For the first time in the fight, the Americans had lost a tank. But the remaining Shermans quickly adjusted their aim. Two American guns fired almost together. Their shells slammed into Richter's Panther within seconds. One struck the turret side, the other hit the hull near the driver's position. The Panther stopped moving. Smoke began pouring from the engine compartment. The battle was over. In less than 5 minutes, the quiet road below the hill had turned into a graveyard of burning armor. 5 German Panthers destroyed. 1 American Sherman lost. Captain Landry slowly climbed higher out of his hatch and looked down the slope through binoculars. Black smoke drifted across the fields. Flames flickered from the wrecked tanks along the road. The hedgerow country of Normandy had once again proven how dangerous it could be. Here, victory did not always belong to the tank with the thicker armor or the bigger gun. Sometimes it belonged to the crew that waited patiently, chose the perfect ground, and fired at exactly the right moment. And on that quiet August morning in 1944, 6 hidden Shermans had turned a peaceful hill into a deadly trap that the German Panthers never saw coming.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.